y'all? Episode 28 of the It's Your Neighbor podcast.
Yes.
I'm Monte Reyment. You guys know my co-host.
Anthony Alvarado. It's good to be back in the house. We are in the house with Dave Willems from Milo Music, which we're about to kick off and introduce. But before we do, how you doing, man? It's summer. We're back here for another week.
Had a little tiny break last week.
Yeah, it was 4th of July.
4th of July week. It was good.
So good to slow down. We didn't blow any fingers off.
Well, they're all here.
By the way, the Brilliant Fireworks Show was fire. It blew my expectations.
That's cool. Was it on the 4th?
Yeah, it was actually on the 6th. It was on
6th?
Saturday.
Oh.
They had a little band, the whole thing.
That's
cool.
It
was a really cool thing.
Yeah, I just chilled. I went fishing on 4th of July with my parents out on Lake Michigan, and we kind of watched fireworks along the shoreline, which was cool.
Classic.
And then Friday, I worked all weekend because you know how it is.
Oh, yeah. We're in a startup phase.
Yeah, we're in the startup.
There is no days off.
I got 20 minutes in on Sunday. The rest was just chilling. But then the team came over on Sunday. We hung out in the backyard and chilled back there, and that was good too. So, yeah, it was good, man. But I'm ready to get back into it.
Dude, this is now our year 2. We're starting in the week 2 of our year 2, technically. Yeah. So, this is a big deal. Just rolled out our marketing training. Yeah. We're rolling out some big initiatives here. New team members aboard.
It's been crazy. I mean, if you had asked me a year ago that we would, one, have a studio like this, 2, you would even, somebody like you or your caliber being here. Rob, I think last year this was the weekend I begged him to come and work by me, and he finally agreed. I had to do it a couple times. But we have the makings of an amazing team, amazing talent.
Yes.
We've done some amazing things, and it continually grows and improves here.
That's right.
It's starting to go. Like, we don't recruit agents, and they're just starting to walk through the door now and wanting to be a part of this. So we're doing something right, which is really
huge
awesome.
Shout out to Taylor, Ashley, and Amanda for joining our team, and Dwayne. That's really in the last couple of weeks. So huge success, a huge development here. So if you want to figure out more about Take Action, just go over to ta realtygroup.com. That's our website. You can just get a hold of us. You can also check out the podcast. It's Your Neighbor Podcast. We have a podcast page, but make sure you go out and subscribe. Also, before we just a little house cleaning, sponsors. Big shout out to our sponsors. All of us.
Yeah, really.
Appreciate
JC Santee Construction, Two Chicas Cleaning, Fox Cities Home Buyers. Always appreciate them.
Yes.
We have
Prime Roofing.
Prime Roofing, THZ Insurance. So thank you guys all for sponsoring not necessarily the podcast, but just Take Action in general and being a part of our moving truck and all of the things. The support, is great. We love it.
So with no further ado, we're going to kick off our interview with Dave Willems from Milo Music. If you know music, you probably have heard of Milo Music from Appleton, Wisconsin.
It's the biggest music festival in our area.
It is amazing
by far
to have you in the house. How are you doing today, man?
Doing great, and thanks for having me. That's great. And THC, by the way, is a sponsor for us, too.
So. Oh, awesome. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
They're one of our sponsors.
I think actually
we did talk about that.
Right? Yeah, Ryan Chambers, right?
Yeah, wide reach, apparently. So.
He's going to come in and, check out the shows, too. He loves music. Well, we all do.
We all love music.
Yeah. That's really selfishly why we have you on the show.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I get that a fair amount.
Right?
I get that a fair amount, so that's okay. Yeah, the idea behind Milo Music, of course, was this idea of meshing several things together, having this experience for the downtown and for the region, and ultimately, I think for the entire region, the idea of putting us on the map, maybe for especially in the Fox Cities and in the Appleton area, the ability to be able to be identified with something that's just kind of pretty cool. And I think we've been very fortunate that it's gotten there much faster than we thought it would in terms of the national and international attention that it gets from the artist community, and fans coming from all 50 states, but the artists, we've got artists this year from 3 or 4 countries, and there's interest from a lot of different places, agents that have artists from all different countries. And so it's, it's Original Music Festival, so it's evolved. And when you were talking about growth and talking about the team coming together, it reminded me a little bit of our year 1 in 2013 to year 2 in 2014. We went from 100 acts the first year to 200 and 200 plus acts, 220 I think it was. The second was 107 to 220. So when it came to the infrastructure of the festival and what we had to do and where we had to have venues placed and stuff and stages and things, and in some cases not stages, just spots where the artist would pull up with a guitar and play, it's worked out pretty well.
How do you come with an idea? Like, thinking of year 1, 100 bands, that's a lot of coordinating. That's a lot of undertaking. Like, obviously it took a huge team effort to even think, but like, where do you start with that to go?
Where's
I'm going to get 100 bands to play
in Appleton
in this music festival. How does that? How do you start with that?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because it was a quick presentation that I was doing, leading a group chat with our downtown hospitality spaces about what kind of an activity could we do that would put people into their businesses, not out on the street, because we are really well known for all of our street stuff, right? Whether it's farm market or Oktoberfest or any of the other activities. Well, they were looking at how can we do something to put people into our venues. And so as I walked back from having led that meeting, my initial thought was sports, because I'd worked for the Packers in my college days, and I thought, we could do some sports legends. We could put them in these bars and stuff. And then the more I thought about that, I thought, well, from an ease of working with getting to people, working with them and stuff, it became more of a, I've also done music. I did the Miller Band Network back in the day, way back when, shortly out of college. And in that, I had a chance to go to the second and third South by Southwests. And this is when it was still a music conference with music showcases at night.
Awesome.
The whole idea of showcases was short showcases. They promised the bands they'd have record executives there. The bands came and played for free, and so I was there the second and third year representing the Miller Band Network, which was for Miller Brewing Company. And so we basically, as I walked back to my office after having led the meeting, I thought, you know what? We've got the downtown, we've got the venues, we've got the spaces where we could pull something like that off. And we could do it in a way maybe that was a little more authentic toward the first 10 years of South by Southwest than maybe what it's become. It's become a mega machine, but it's very commercialized and all that sort of stuff. So how could we kind of keep it to something that would more fit Appleton and the infrastructure and stuff. And so that's where the idea came from. And then it was, as we sat down and started thinking about
that's quite a vision from a group chat to go
I left a meeting and then we did one of the biggest festivals in the area.
Sounds like something I would do,
It was funny because the two biggest things that came from that meeting, and I still have the easel sheet in my office, is walkability. They felt walkability was a strength of downtown Appleton. And secondly was this idea of how can we do something to put people into our venues. And so from there, it kind of, the two things kind of meshed. And so we've really tried to make sure that it stays a walkability festival. In those early years, we got approached by everybody. Can you have an offshoot here? Can you have an offshoot there? Can you have something over on Wisconsin Avenue? And as much as we liked those spaces and stuff, it was like we're not taking people through neighborhoods. They're either walking or driving or whatever. And so the idea was if people could get down to downtown, park, and then they have the whole day. They have whatever long they want to. If they want to stay at the hotel, they can stay for all 4 days. And the cool aspect of it is, we've got folks who come, as you know, for all 4 days, and they plunk down at the hotel or they plunk down with some friends. The part that is most rewarding is when we have locals say to us, to the team, that this is our thing that we put on the calendar every year, and this is when my brother comes back to visit, my sister comes back to visit.
That's really cool.
Because they all grew up in Appleton, but they didn't have, it wasn't that Appleton. And so when they say that, it's very humbling. That first year we had a whole team. We had our marketing services. We had to decide as a team, are we going to do this or not? And that meant me going to my brother and saying basically, so are we going to do this? It's going to probably be $500,000 of services that we're going to put into this. We ended up paying ourselves $5,000 that first year. So and he was like, I have a feeling you're going to do it anyway. So he said, let's do it. He lives up here in Green Bay, by the way, not too far from here. And so we jumped in. We recruited Corey Chisel to jump in and help out from a face perspective and an artist perspective. He was down in Nashville and spent his formative years in Appleton. And then we had
on some of the first kind of promos.
And then we had our whole team that were, so that first launching team was really that whole team. And then some volunteers who stepped forward. The individual who did the booking stepped forward as a volunteer. He eventually became an employee. And that's how we launched the first year. And when we sat down to talk about, so what are we going to do? How many it started out at about 60. We thought if we could get to a number like 60 artists or 60 acts, that's solo, duo, trio, band, that would feel like a lot. That would feel, because the idea was let's have this music and these tunes take over downtown. That was the concept. That very first poster was kind of a giant Corey walking through downtown like he was stepping on stuff and pushing it. And so the idea and then as we started booking, it started to be, well, this band, but the lead singer also does solo, or the lead. There's a duo in the band. And so before you knew it, we had 107 acts, and it was we had 250 sets the first year. But then the next year it was 220 acts, and I think we had 700 sets right away. And so it's been about we've gotten as close as 1 year. I think we had 990 996 sets, and I remember saying to the team, so we couldn't come up with 4 more?
Right, I was going to say
but it's just what the number ended up being. When you added it in the bus, and you added in the pop-ups, and you added, and then just kind of ended up being about 990.
So let's actually take one step back just for 2 seconds. So for anybody that's listening that hasn't been to Mile of Music and hasn't been to South by Southwest, you're like, okay, I'm trying to visualize this from a very basic standpoint. What is the show going to look like this year?
Yeah. So again, it's just there's 35 stages roughly, and there's another 5 venues where we do other stuff that's not necessarily live music, but we have our merch and we have different things, and it's the headquarters and cool places to stop and see. But we have 40 venues, 35 stages, and at times on like a Saturday afternoon, Saturday early evening, all 35 of those stages are going, and they're mostly up and down the avenue from east to west. It's a mile between the chapel at Lawrence University and Spats on the other side. And when we first came up with that name, it was actually an intern working with us over the winter of 2012, Henry Bremhorst, who I said, kind of walking out the door one day, I said, think of some names for the music festival, because he was coming on board he was a Marquette student. He was coming in for 3 or 4 weeks just to help out. And I said, well, and he called and said, I need to do a free intern. I need to do an internship for my degree. Can I do a free one? I said, sure. I said, we got a music festival we're thinking of doing. Come on in. So I said, come up with some names. And he came up with some names, and one of them was the Musical Mile. And so I took those names with me over to Wood Nickel, and I sat and had lunch, and I started playing around with it. And that was the one that jumped at me as there's something there. And then by the time I left, it was Mile of Music, and the idea of putting the marketing spin on it and so forth. And then this idea of the giant troubadour coming down the avenue and stuff. And so that's how it kind of played out that first year. And so if someone's coming to and Spats on the west end, so Chapel and Spats. So when we had the name, then I had to get in the car and drive it, and it was 0.95. So it was close enough. I figured it was close enough. At that point, I think 994
sets. You're just short of everything.
At that point, I was thinking if it's anywhere within like 0.2 of a mile, it's going to be the mile.
That's great. That's genius.
It couldn't have worked out any better. I literally drove from in front of the steps at the chapel to in front of Spats at that point, and it was pretty cool. Actually, the first year we went the next block. We had Frank's Pizza Pal involved the first year, and so we had that. So it's 0.95. So right now we're probably at 0.9. But that was cool. And then so for someone coming to the festival, first of all, it's a free music festival. It's one of the largest free music festivals in the world, really, and one of the more unique free music festivals in the sense that you can go into, like on the 400 block of West College, you can go into 4 venues or 5 venues within 2 minutes and just check the music out and say, do I want to stay for this band? Do I want to go? That kind of thing. Some of our, in the early days, our music fans referred to as, is the band beer worthy? Are they going to go in? And that's all changed now because they just know that almost all of them are beer worthy, we always talk about the artists you don't know, but you should. So people coming to it have to understand that it's all original. They're not going to hear any cover music, but also that they're not going to probably hear music that they've already heard. They're probably not going to know the artist because we're bringing them in. And I think on the if we borrow a baseball comparison, in the baseball world, there's single A, high single A, double A, triple A, major leagues. Our artists are artists that would love to be in the major leagues. They'd love to be at the triple A level, but they're somewhere in that single A to double A level. Sure. They're outstanding. Yeah. They're really good. And I was just talking to one of the artists the other night at our show at Gibson Community Music Hall, and he was talking about how he did a dive one night, and he was looking at all the people he knew and all the bands he knew and how good they were. And he said, and this is just the folks that I know, he said. And I said, well, I've done it too. And there's thousands of artists that are out there that are at this level that are just looking for audiences that want to come and hear them, that want to actually pay attention, that want to be part of the experience. And that's what we've been able to craft. It's this experience that's soul enriching for the artist, not soul defeating or soul crushing. Yeah. That's the key.
How does that process start then, selecting the bands?
Yeah, it starts right away. I mean, every year we and it actually continues. Like we already have a couple lined up for the following year that are coming from like the UK and stuff, and they have to have long-term plans and so forth. So we've already got a couple. But usually we also do a submission process that usually takes place. It'll probably take place this year in early November, and that's for new artists, and it's an opportunity for artists to submit. The reality is we only take a handful of those because most of our artists now come through established relationships with agencies. There's
referrals,
agencies. And then also, exactly. And then one of the best ways is artists saying, hey, you should check out this band back in Charleston. that's really, really good or whatever. And so that's become a key source. And then, of course, the bands that surface here in Wisconsin, the local, will have, I think, 40%, 45% of our lineup this year is cool. Wisconsin artists. And so that's really important to us. And that number usually floats between 35 and 45%. But now it's grown because the number of artists in Wisconsin that are surfacing, there's more and more original music opportunities around the state for these artists. Whether it's the Driftless area, whether it's our stuff here in the Fox Cities, whether it's some key venues that happen up here in Green Bay or down in Milwaukee and so forth. And so we've been fortunate that there has been immense interest. Going into a year ago, we opened the submittal process and it closed in an hour and a half. We had 200 submissions in an hour and a half. This past year, we said that wasn't fair because we had artists that were bummed that they could. Right. In some ways, they just want to submit. They want to get their stuff out there. Yeah. And so we left it open this year for a week. We made everybody aware it was going to be open for a week. We reminded them that it's a long shot to be selected through this process. We had 750 submissions in that 1 week. Yeah. And so we know that, but at the same time, we had amazing comments from all the artists. Thank you for doing it this way. And what we said to them was, you're not, at this point now, you're no longer just submitting to play the festival, you're submitting to maybe play Appleton and the venues that exist in Appleton, or even if it's a venue up here in Green Bay that we might say, hey, they're coming to play here, they should play your place too.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I see that happen all the time. And Mile Music does more events throughout the year that you're associated with, of course, and different locations.
That's the goal, is to have more and more stuff and have it be year-round. And we just had some...
More like a mile down the road kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And we've done a couple of mile down the road shows that we've done out at cool little venues where we just take the show on the road. And that's been really both successful, but also just kind of a new way, and also keeps things fresh for us a little bit too, with everything that we're doing. So, yeah, I think we peaked one year at almost 1,000 sets, and then we have settled in at about 700 to 750. That includes the venues. It includes the bus that we have. This year, the bus will not be driving on its route. Last year, it had to do a different route because when we did the College Avenue, the street, the painting, the bus doesn't go up and down the avenue anymore. So it went around and then went down on the riverfront. And this year, with the shortage of drivers they have and stuff, we're going to just leave the bus stationary. Okay. And it's going to be there for the 4 days, but it's or 3 days, but it's still going to be a stage.
Yeah,
we're still going to have
mural.
music on the bus.
Music is happening on the bus. I mean, just Mile Music alone, I just kind of echo some of the things that you said is, seeing you guys from those early days. I think I saw a panel with Corey, yourself, a couple other people. Adrian Palm pulled a bunch of people together at the T-Rat Stadium, and you were kind of year 2 or year 1, just talking about what's up and coming for Mile Music, and then having a relationship with Corey Chisel and, Traveling Suitcase and all those guys, because I was booking them through like Cranky Pat's back in the day with Miles Nielsen and those guys, and it was awesome just knowing that this was about to happen. And then fast forward when the festival happened, especially in those early years, my children were right between the ages of like 8 and 12. And so to introduce both my son and my daughter at a young age to be able to walk up, because we always lived close to downtown Appleton, to be able to walk up literally to an outdoor location, primarily throughout the day for the first half, and be able to introduce music in a very open platform and even play drums alongside friends and be able to kind of jump all over the place. And being an individual in recovery, not having to go into a bar and experience it maybe at a coffee shop or on the corner store or some little spot I didn't know of, right? Or even just going over to the beautiful Lawrence Chapel and
alleyways. We'd had stuff in alleyways.
Exactly. Like being able to bring my children to that was one thing. But again, even like now, our friends, we always meet up every year. If I'm in town, we go to Mile of Music. That's the thing that we do. And seeing some of the better performances is really exciting, I think, for Appleton specifically, for somebody that has thought about moving out of the area for years because it lacked culture, it lacked creativity, it lacked music. I wanted to move to Austin. I wanted to go to the my Southwest. I have family that lives down there. And when this started to happen, it really, I believe, changed kind of the creative culture especially, and gave opportunities to so many friends of mine to showcase their music. Everybody from the Red Hawks to some of those early performances. Just really great to see the feedback from artists too. Being in the crowd, almost every performance I've been to is like, Mile Music is great. It's awesome. You guys are an amazing crowd, and you just have been been so welcoming
That's about how
to
we
us
treat.
as artists.
That's about how we treat them.
Yeah.
And one of the early planning discussions we had, I remember Corey saying specifically, he can tell within the first hour or two of going to a venue or going to a festival in particular. He mentioned a few festivals. I won't mention them. I've never mentioned them. But he said I can tell within an hour or two whether I want to go back or not, or whether I feel like I might go back strategically. It's important for me to go back. But he said, as far as feeling welcome and stuff, he said if we could double down on that, and so we were all like writing notes, and that was one for sure. Within 2 weeks, I think we had the artist care program established with Jeff Romanesco and his brother and his kids are all dentists, and I call them the gang of dentists. And it's not a very good movie, but I think it could be a pretty cool musical though.
It could
but
be.
I guess it's probably been done already. But so they did dental care, and we had an artist care program ever since, and it's expanded so much, and it's what got Rolling Stone to do the article.
Yes, that was last year, right?
It's one of the reasons PBS Wisconsin's coming this year, and with 40 crew, and they're going to film throughout the festival and produce a docu-feature, and as well as just they figure they're going to film like 1,000 hours plus of footage for 25 minutes within the hour special, but all the rest of that stuff will be able to be used for content, and for them and for us and stuff. So they're going to be everywhere. They're going to have like 6 crews out filming and stuff. So it's going to be pretty neat. And the artist care piece has become kind of that thing that nationally and internationally is known. And they refer to it, they'll oftentimes say stuff like, that's where they do the dental care, or that's where they do the hearing care, or whatever. And now what's really cool is other festivals are starting to jump in on that. And that's really neat because, that's none of these artists at this level are being paid big bucks. And many of them do have full-time jobs. Many of them do have benefits.
So true.
But the reality is a lot of them don't. And so the idea of being able to come here, we've had 2 discoveries of melanomas. And in both cases, their significant others said we saved their lives because they would have never gone in to get checked. So the idea is that when they come here, it's how do we treat them? How do we put the red carpet out for them? As Jamie Kent says, we get treated like rock stars for the weekend. And that's as I said to our team, we're not really on the way to anything. If you're a football fan, we are. But in addition to football, I look at it, I always look at this and I say, the arts is an area that fulfills life. Athletics can fulfill life. And the third thing for me is service. Whatever that is, public service, for some people it's church, and it's just different things that fill that void. For me, it's community service. And so this was created as a community service thing. We've never made money. We've never made a profit. We continue to shortfall it. We continue to figure out ways to get it to break even every year. But there's a lot of people interested in the conversation we're having right now is how do we secure this for the future? How do we make sure that it's around for the next 30 years? And so that's kind of one of the things we're working on. And this year we're adding just some new wrinkles to the festival. We're going to have more pop-ups, just kind of surprise shows as you're making your way around kind of a thing. And we're going to have
rooftop shows.
No rooftop shows. Appleton, I have to say, and Appleton has not been amenable to rooftops.
Yes, right.
This never has. We did have one rooftop show one year that Spats did that was under the radar, and it was a very quick, like 30-minute show that the Brothers Footman did. And then they were off the roof real quick. But I think there's a little bit of that coming in the future. I've heard a lot of rumblings about places that are looking to do that. The city has some very stringent rules, but when that happens, it'll be pretty cool to have some. I know that U.S. Venture is looking at some really cool stuff for that parklet area next to Copper Rock, and they're looking at doing something pretty cool there, like a 2-level thing in that space. And we've been talking to them about just getting on the reservation to have can we be reserved in to do some music?
Well, there's so much development that's happening downtown.
I would assume too. That's a big part of it, though. You brought up the city, restricting the rooftop. I'm sure they're super accommodating at this point with the Mile of Music, but they have. I'm sure that it's their house, their rules, kind of thing.
Oh, of course, and they've always worked with us. It's never been a challenge. I think on just that one thing, there's some concerns about getting it done right. And we, quite frankly, as you look around the area and stuff, there's all the buildings are so tight together and stuff. I'm sure there aren't a lot of obvious choices for that.
For sure.
But they've been great to work with. We're continuing to work on different things. They're very pleased that Mile, as well as the farm market, as well as the major events we have in Appleton, have helped to create these 12 building projects that just went on. And there's now all these new spaces to live and stuff, and they're getting booked pretty heavily.
So workspaces, new condos, new apartments.
It's changed a lot, and we take great pride in the fact that we were a part of that. So,
and even the amphitheater. I mean, you got to think, really, that was created essentially
with Jones Park,
for Mile of Music and the other festivals that happen.
Right.
And we do have some very large events, of course, in the area, but Mile of Music has really made a staple. And I know in those beginning days, we weren't really sure how it was going to work. Like, how was a whole free festival going to happen every single
First year, we didn't know for sure.
And I knew just some of my friends being in, it's a run. I mean, those guys, they put in the work. You know what I mean? And they love it, though.
Chris Gold, I think, did 17 sets
Chris,
one year.
He's so great to work with.
Where he jumped in and did other stuff and so forth. He's now doing 5 or 6. So he's done the most that we've had during the years of the festival. But it is one of those things where the first year we had no idea, because you're doing a free festival. We had great participation from the media. The Post Crescent at that time was still such a huge force in the area, and things have changed for it now, and it's done a good job of kind of keeping its ground in certain areas. But back then, I think it did 17 little cover stories or mentions of us the first year.
And they had the strongest distribution back then.
And so that helped, but we didn't know. And being a marketing PR guy all my life, we hadn't sold tickets. So you didn't know if there were 6,000 people coming or 4,000. So we got lucky in that. We figured there was about 15,000 attendees that first year. And we got the phone call. The first show was at Spats. We had those tornadoes came through on that Tuesday into Wednesday, or Monday night into Tuesday. And I remember I was laying in bed, had the windows open, and we missed most of it where we were in Appleton, but we had just watched the news and we knew that it was coming and stuff, and overnight. And so then the next day we all wake up and most everybody doesn't have power.
Great.
And we had said the one thing that could probably take a music festival down is not having power. And we're like, And so then Thursday morning, the last 3 venues went back online. Stone Arch went back online. Spats, where they were located, was on a different grid. And they had the first set was at 11:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And they had Roger Giacella, an artist from Wapaka, who was living in Florida doing the Jimmy Buffett thing.
Okay.
He had a beer cup thing tucked into the top of his guitar, like cut into the top of his guitar. He just set the beer in there and he'd play his guitar. And that was the whole Jimmy Buffett thing.
Style.
But he had 5 CDs of his own music. And so his friends had reached out and said, "Do you know who Roger Giacella is? He'd love to come up and play the first festival." So he played the first year, did the very first set at Mile at Spats, and we got a phone call. We were in the Conkey's bookstore as our headquarters at the time. They had just closed, and I said to John, the previous owner, I said, "We probably could sell your building if we use it for our headquarters." And he did. He got 4 offers, which was cool.
That's awesome.
But kind of relates to what you guys do, right?
Yeah, for sure. He's like, that is awesome.
Best time to list is on Mile of Music.
Exactly. So we got a phone call from the volunteer who was down at Spats, and he said, I was told to call in and let you know how things work, because we still didn't know. And he said, the patio's full and there's 60 people watching from the parking lot. And we all kind of cheered, and it was like, maybe this is something.
This is going to be something.
It was pretty cool. And that first year was really neat. And we had folks like Charlie Parr, a legend in the folk world from Minnesota, from Duluth, stopping by the headquarters just to tell us how well run the festival was and how he was just blown away. He ended up playing City Center Plaza in the middle, and he said, he said to me specifically, he said, I walked in there and I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. And he said, and it was like a church. He said the sound was really good, and you had a sound tech there, and I was like, they have a sound tech, So we were off and running at that point.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So one of the things that we like to do on the show is kind of jam into this conversation. Like, we really respect those that are out, our neighbors that are creating community. But there's also like challenges in creating community. You've already talked about some of those, but for a lot of our listeners that are out building things and are part of this community and helping it to become one of the better places to live in the United States, what are some of the big challenges that you've overcome over this, the years that you've been doing Mile of Music? What's something that sticks out to you that maybe you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still, one of the challenges we're still facing is just this idea of, as it's gotten bigger, then it came along with, how do we keep it sustainable? How do we fund it? And we have pulled it back a little bit. We've had to fine tune, and we had to fine tune a little bit this year. We don't have quite as many sets on Friday and Saturday at all the venues as we had last year, and so we pulled back a little bit, because it's like, there's a certain point you have to be able to afford it, and so we're still figuring some of that out. But it's still a fire hose of music with 700 sets over 4 days and really over 3.5 days or 3 days, because Thursday's kind of a little bit more than the half day, and then Sunday's not even. It's like 2 sets on Sunday at most of the venues. So Sunday's like a relax but still have music day.
Yeah, that closing ceremony is cool too.
Yeah, and so. I think that has become the biggest thing. And I think right now our biggest obstacle is just a perception, because we're a very popular music festival that has become well known around the country, certainly in the artist world, but also in the original music fan world. But we aren't there yet as a successful festival. We still have to get to the point where it's sustainable financially. It doesn't have to make a lot of money. It just has to get to a point where it settles in at, we've kind of settled in at a number that's short of break even, which is stressful for me every year. And we just need to get to a point where it settles in at just over break even. And we'll get there, but it's that's become the biggest challenge. And I think the issue is people just don't know. And so when it comes to community, and we're building community, and everything we do, I'm glad you said that, because everything we do, when we have our conversations, I've always been a community guy. It's at the expense of being a good business guy. And my brother can tell you that, because he had to many times kind of come in and say, well, we can only give this much away. We can't really give this much away as a marketing firm. And so ultimately, but we talk about it behind the scenes all the time, is the motivation has to be, it has to either improve the festival, whatever we're going to do. If we're going to do a photo booth somewhere, it's got to be a plus for the festival, and it also has to build community. And so I think the sponsors we've settled in with, they understand that, and they've been with us, many of them since year 1 or 2. They believe in building community as well. Many of them have gone on to sponsor other events as in addition to, and others have gone on to sponsor other events instead of, and that's all great, because they're helping to benefit the community in general. But that is our we have 12 mile markers that are the things that, why do we do this festival? What's the purpose behind it? Like a business would have, what's our purpose statement? We kind of did one with 12 mile markers, and one of those mile markers is all about building a spirit of community. And I think music probably does that. Gosh, and that's the reason we started the festival. Is I remember having done a couple of concerts with Corey, and sitting back. They were for charity purposes, and I sat in the back and I watched the reaction from the crowd and how they were making this connection, and that connection rings true now. With there'll be 185 artists. There'll be 40 music educators at the festival this year. So those 225 either artists or presenters will all make connections with at least one fan, but in many cases dozens of fans. And I'd love to tell the story of making my way up and down the avenue, and I was running to do something probably down by the chapel, and I had to walk past the Houdini fountain at Houdini, and there was a band playing, but there was also the Vagabonds, not Daniel the lead guy, but all the rest of the band members were standing at the fountain talking to a family of about 6. There was grandparents, parents, and then like 2 kids, and they were talking to them at the fountain. I went and did my stuff. I came back. It was probably 40 minutes later. They were still talking to the family of 6, and so that they became social friends. They became all that kind of stuff. And so for our fans in Appleton, and for the community, to bring this many creatives to Appleton, and the people, there'll be 600 musicians coming to Appleton this year for those 4 days, and they all are just in. I think we can count on one hand, even after the fireworks, we can count on one hand that there have been less than 5 divas, or as I call them, divas or divos, in the process, and they're just good people, and they're also good, and they're also good artists.
No, I have blasts every single year. We were in the plaza last year with my brothers, and he just talked about it the other day. He's like, man, we went to Mile of Music last year. We have to go this year, just because, the bands that you introduced me to blew my mind. I had no idea that I was going to have that much fun at this festival.
Yeah, well, and the cool part of the festival is, and for those who are listening and so forth, is there's a festival within the festival for just about anybody, in the sense that if you're older and you don't want to walk a mile, because mile music can sound imposing, if you stay within a 2 or 3 block area, or even just stay on the Lawrence campus, and you come and you park on that end, and you go to the chapel, you go to Harper Hall, and you go to the Lawrence Lawn, which is the outside stage. That's a festival within a festival. I mean, most communities would love to have that festival. That's that's 60 sets of music over 3 days or 4 days. They would love to have that. But you can go there and not wear yourself out. Make it doable. If you're in a wheelchair or something, there's ways to get around there. And then on the other hand, if you're looking to just kind of come down and enjoy the raucous band music, come down at 8 o'clock, spend that last 4 hours of the festival from 8 to midnight on the western end and hit some of those
you got
bars.
people just traveling everywhere. People are having a blast. And the thing that I like about it too is like people like to drink out there, I get it. But mild music to me, the thing that I worried about, I guess, in the early days is like, is this going to be like another festival?
We heard that a lot.
Like another rager. And I was like, oh man, I hope not. Because
we're so used to it around here, so everybody just assumed.
And it's not that at all. No, sure. People party and stuff, but at the end of the day, people are really having a good time, dancing. So many different types of people are coming together. When I go to the festival, I'm always impressed by not the amount of artists, but especially the number of concert goers. The music makers are one thing, but the mix of people that come there, from younger, and you're even seeing some of this kind of like crossover traffic from like last year. It just seemed like people were coming in because it was a thing, and they might even not even know exactly what's going down.
And I'll bet if you went up and asked some of those, like say a 45 or 50-year-old guy that's going there that you didn't see him, didn't recognize him as a regular music goer, and you asked the story, there's probably a story there of, listening to whomever it might be, the Allman Brothers or the whatever, and they fell in love, or their parents listened to it, and so they were in the backseat listening to it, and now they're coming. What they're coming to the mile for, they know they're not going to see that band, but what they're going to see is they're going to see a band that was influenced by that band, that's playing some stuff that's in the ballpark of, and that's just pretty cool.
Nostalgia.
That drums, guitar, and rock and roll.
One thing that you said, and I want to shout out some friends because you said how this opens up opportunities for other creatives, and just real quick, like Chris, the photographer from Chicken and the Egg, he shot a bunch of photos last year.
did
And such a great talent.
Did a great job.
He loved to be able to showcase those photos, and he's so excited to talk about them.
I had to show him a couple of pointers, like if you just turn the camera this way, or no.
Well, that goes.
I did not.
Right?
Chris
but then
great.
You also have like Chad Brady
That's a
with
quick
the
way to
Milo
have him
music.
be an ex-photographer.
Right. Right. Chris is great. He works with us too. He's also just a kind soul. Like
he's a great dude.
Chad is actually right now, we haven't even announced this to the general public yet, but Chad is actually working feverishly, without doubt. But also, it's feverishly partly because he's in 115-degree temperatures, but down in Phoenix, in that Phoenix area. But he is working on. We're going to be debuting shortly 11 guitars. So it'll be basically the 11 a guitar for every mile is what we're calling it, and it's he's painting 11 guitars, and so we're gonna auction off those. We're gonna auction off those 11 guitars, and shout out to John Schmidt, recently retired CEO of U.S. Venture. He funded Chad's efforts to do it. So we're starting.
I'm so happy for Chad. He's been talking to me about so many things like that.
Oh, he's got so many good ideas. We got some other cool stuff for the future. But and he of course he led the mural effort inside Gibson. So the three artists that painted it, Neo Medina and Julie Gillick, and Chad led that project. So we have the surround mural inside Gibson with the 6 images. But
Neo is awesome too. You guys check that podcast out.
Yeah, last episode, Neo Paint the City. I mean, again, great artists, connected to the scene. Also,
no doubt.
Who else I want to call? Oh, Dave Jackson doing his photo.
He did amazing stuff.
He did so many
done amazing things.
Shots
in the early
of
years,
artists and portraits.
In the early years, for sure.
For sure. We're about to flip it. But before we turn it around.
Oh, you remembered.
I did remember this time. I'm at 28 episodes in or whatever,
You initiated it finally.
Finally started to get it.
We didn't even make eye contact this time.
I know, this time we didn't even make. So we're going to flip it here in a second where you get a chance to ask us questions. So you can ask us anything, really. And so you become the host. But before we do that, you're talking about doing a lot for the community. And you've been working in the community for quite some time, not just with Mile and Music. One thing that entrepreneurs and other community leaders come on and talk about is, some of the challenges that they face personally. So one thing that I like to ask is just how do you take care of yourself while you're preparing for one of the biggest festivals in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, this past year, I've always been someone who just kind of internalizes things, which isn't a great thing. But it's kind of worked for me the way I've been able to. What I do is I tend to jump into projects, and even before Mile, when our firm started in 1999, we always gave about half away every year of what we did. And those were projects that I felt when I went home at night, I knew that marketing as a small marketing agency, I was not going to have me be able to buy an island after 10 or 20 years. And so for me, it was island in my mind, so to speak, but it was basically how can I feel better about what we're doing and what the team's doing. And I know that the people who've worked at our place have worked there because of the feeling they got from doing a lot of the community projects. And then the festival came along, and we haven't done as many community projects now because we're totally immersed in this one. But again, what does that do for the community? How does it change the community? I mean, I would like to argue that, for the community, for the city in particular, there's a brand here that they didn't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for, that we can all continue to build on, and other spaces in downtown. We oftentimes get the comment from folks that you should be charging these folks more, and you should be charging the venues more, and you should be charging, and it's like, but all of these folks are helping to make the festival happen.
Exactly.
And if they benefit from it, that only helps our core of our community, which is Appleton, which is the core of the Fox Cities. So I've seen it. I've worked with all these different communities over the years on different marketing projects. I know that if we can have a healthy, stable downtown, a healthy, stable core, that's going to lead to a better situation. So for me, that is enough from a psyche standpoint to keep that piece of it going. I had some health challenges at the beginning of the year that I was able to get through, my first ones that I've had in my life, really. And so that got me thinking a little differently about stuff. And I also, I think more importantly, people coming out of the woodwork, with texting and stuff, right? So you're at home in the lounger at 11 and you're doing stuff. Well, now I'm getting texts from people saying, so have you thought about, how is this going to get and it's like, well, what have you heard? I mean, what do you, I said,
I'm doing okay.
I'm starting to read into things a little bit more too.
We caught everything early and I'm doing okay and stuff, but everybody knows, I guess, probably knows me and knows that, maybe a little nudging to try to get things in order for the community, because they know that the number one thing for me is that this sustains into the future.
That's right.
And number two thing is that our team is taken care of. And so we've just had some great people in the community helping with that.
Speaking about people texting you, by the way, one of those people is Brad Bardini. Brad, we work with, he's one of our coaches and good friends.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, we're sending him
out healing thoughts.
Now.
Absolutely.
Tons of healing thoughts and prayers out to you, Brad. But I know he shared with me in a session that we had, basically in short, it was like just giving love between, some text messages went a long way for him spiritually and just was motivating to be able to not only check in on you, but also you being kind to check in.
Yeah,
that's funny. I just shot him a text right before the episode. So
he and Kurt Gunn are both late night texters with me. I'm a little careful with Kurt because he's also, firefighter apparently. So I don't know if he's working or if he's got to get up, But Brad and Kurt will be at Gibson or at Basil's on the 22nd for a little outdoor patio show as Brothers Gunn. Yeah. And together they're awesome. They're really good.
We've heard them a couple times.
Yeah. And I'm always encouraging the artists too. Not that it didn't take me to encourage them. They know what they're doing. But for the younger artists and other artists, I'm always saying, you got a good solo act, you got a really good band, but you might want to kind of figure out a duo thing, or figure out, because it's just more flexibility in some of that for the venues and stuff to be able to afford you. And so a lot of them are just really doing things the right way and doing it smartly. And I think we figure there's about 80 or so original music artists between Oshkosh and Green Bay. That was not the case. That was not the case 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
So it's got to be a little bit of an incubator then.
It is. Yeah. That's the idea. When you have a place like Gibson where you're trying to do some really cool acoustic stuff as well as some band stuff over the course of a year, you got a lot of dates to fill. Yeah. So now you need a spot for maybe an opener, maybe you need a middle act spot, maybe you need a headliner. So we've been able to that part of the music scene has really evolved, and I'm also thrilled that a lot of the spaces that have evolved, not all, but a lot, and they shouldn't all be, because there's an awful lot of people, more people in all likelihood, that are much more cover music fans, right? Because that's what they grew up with, that's what they know, that's what they hear, and they love to go out and they love to be able to have their conversations, they love the music going on in the background. That's all great, and I hear from those folks all the time that they have more opportunities now than they ever had, because people are just
those guys are crushing.
Yeah, people are just thinking of music.
They're everywhere all
people
the
are just thinking of music more often than they did 10 years ago, and so it's really cool.
And I think too, maybe a point of that is I think social media has kind of lost its steam a little bit. People are wanting those live social,
real
in-person, real interactions
intimate,
now.
No doubt.
It's run its course a little bit. I mean, it's still
Yeah,
everybody's on there. That's their dopamine rush.
Now they're
right?
doing
But-
both, kind of, and the experiences make a difference. But
Yeah.
I've been impressed with the number of original music spaces, as these places. Summertime, everybody has a patio, and so we scale back at Gibson because it's really hard to compete. But I've been impressed with how many of these patios are doing original music, or at least allowing original artists to come in too, because it used to be, and they tell us this all the time. Even today, the artists will come in. The artist the other night did a 6 or 7 show run, and there was 1 or 2 spots where they were basically the venue owners were like, do half and half. And it was like, well, we're an original music band.
Yeah, we're not trying to do covers
We
today.
do have covers, but and so then
I love when a band does a real quick like hot cover and they're like, this is part of our set and it's fun.
Yeah.
But if it's just
it's a song we wish we wrote.
I like
that
original
kind of
music.
stuff.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you ready to rock and roll?
Let's go.
All right. So what kind of questions would you have?
Well, I'm going to throw it right back at you with that last question a little bit more and say, so when you talk about community building and stuff for you, and there's what you do for a living here, and there's a direct impact on that, which is places to live and how that plays out in the real estate business and so forth. But why is it so important to you guys from a community perspective?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's just gratitude. It's like we live in the community. We make money because of the houses that we sell, and so when I opened this brokerage, there's something clicked with me about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I started watching. One, I had a person that I sold their property to, or I sold the property, got on closing day. I showed up at closing. I gave them a little closing gift. And then I followed up with them like a month later just to see how they were doing, just checking in. Yo, how's the new house? Whatever. And they called me and they said, we've sold 3 houses now. You're the first person who checked in on us and gave us a closing gift and actually showed up at closing. You weren't just there to collect the check. And I was like, okay, a couple of things here. One, icky, right? Like it just feels
just transactionally typically.
like you get to the end, you grab the check and you run and you never talk to them again. Like how I made that person feel, and you talked about that before, is how you made the bands feel.
Right.
Like I want that same type of feeling for our
people to feel
buyers
enriched.
And,
Yeah.
And I don't want people just to be like a client to us. I want I want them to become a fan of what we're doing. I also want to know that we're giving to the community, not just giving back, because I always get weird about the word give back a little bit. I know it's maybe a little semantics,
little language, but
it's a little language. But if you're giving back, that means you have to take something in order to give it back. At least in my vision, is like, let's just give. Maybe the community will give back, to us, and it does. So we're doing that blindly as well. So there's just those, how you make somebody feel how I feel after a transaction, instead of feeling dirty and like, I got that check, and then it's done. I don't like that. So that was really it. It was to make myself feel better about what I'm doing. Yeah. But then also in the same time, I started noticing, one is networking people and bringing people together. And then 2, like everybody feels good. That's what it should feel like, right?
And to add to that, I mean, when I got a chance to sit down with this team, it was really last year. In fact, my fiance was talking about it in this morning's training. Like, you wrote a year ago that you wanted to take action in life and take on a new opportunity, just like you said you always would after doing Rise for a decade. We just celebrated, of course, down in Houdini Plaza. You helped us out last year. But I knew I'd transition to something else, and learning about how Take Action was looking to create space and hold space and also build lifelong relationships and have more of a value add to making this a literal one-stop shop to make your life easier, to make the biggest decision of your life, or one of the biggest decisions, that's buying a home. And to me, coming from where I come from very personally, I want to know what the meaning of home is today. And even if you just ask that question to people today, you get so many different exciting answers. And me as a storyteller and as a marketer, I love to share story and I love to build brand. And like this morning's training, we talked about building a brand, and a brand helps you feel something. When you think of Mile in Music, you don't just think about music festival. You think about the good times you had. You think about the artists that you really enjoyed, the ones you got a chance to talk to, the food that you got a chance to eat with your friends, or the new people that you partied with that you never thought you would hang out with. Those experiences, like I shared with my daughter being backstage with Traveling Suitcase recently, we'll probably remember this for the rest of our life. That is building more than a company and marketing a good product. That is doing something that is literally investing back in the community. When they said they were serious about that, I wanted to take action with them.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about nostalgia. Like I think that's where music comes in. Like I'll hear a certain song I haven't heard in 35 years, it'll bring like that memory will flash right back to where I was sitting the last time I heard that song, or like something emotional happened or whatever.
Oh my gosh,
that's
good,
the power
bad,
of music.
in between,
yeah, whatever,
like whatever, just brings you right back to that
right
moment.
back there, and I'm like, oh man, like even like I'll hear a song and I'll remember a video game I was playing when I was like 13 years old. I'm like, I haven't thought about that video game since I last heard that song.
The Dave Muir BMX game, there's so many great tracks in there, like old like punk and stuff like that. I just love that.
My wife's become a big fan of John Mayer through my daughter, and so they go to see John Mayer when they can, and so she of course has got a promo offer to have the satellite radio on the car. So because she's a farm girl, so she's pretty frugal. so she jumped at that, and so now when you get in the car, and I'm driving her car today, it's John Mayer radio on satellite. Well, he on the way up. I wasn't going to futz with anything. So on the way up, he's talking about stories behind the song. He's introducing the songs, but every one of them he's talking about. And this reminds me back when I worked at the record shop when I was 16. But music is amazing at that. And I've actually begun to appreciate it even more because I'm more of an experienced guy. People always come up to me and say, you must just have a huge record catalog and you must have this huge music. And I'm like, music has always been there for me, but it's never been something that I've been over the top on. My wife can tell you almost every lyric from her. She had a 10-year-old brother that was 10 years older than her, and a brother that was 5 years older than her, and they'd come back from college and to the farm, and then they'd have all these albums. She'd listen. She knows so much of that stuff. She'd be a great partner in a trivia thing, right? A music trivia.
Yes.
I would not be, but what I am,
I'm that way too.
I can't remember the best songs of my favorite artists.
But what I am pretty good at is just figuring out what people want for an experience, and especially the folks that are at a certain age and above. I'm in that group, and so I can tell what kind of, and I've been able to watch it, and it goes back to that first time I did the charity concert with Corey, and I just saw the back couple rows, and they were just hanging on every word, and in some cases they knew who he was and they had been to his shows. Right. In other cases they had not, and so that's I think what we've the music discovery. We always refer to it as discovery and exploration, and that's the beauty of this thing with the festival with Mile of Music is that you're coming to something and you're going to hopefully find your next favorite band that you had no idea that you were. We have a band this year, Bandits on the Run, coming. It's a trio from Brooklyn, and they came from different parts of the country, and they met on the subway busking in New York.
No way.
And they're now a band, a trio.
Cool.
And they played Gibson in February of 23. And we didn't get a chance to have them back this year. They played Folk Alliance in Kansas City and wanted to play on that run, but that was when I was having my healthcare stuff, and it kind of fell through the cracks. They are outstanding, and they're just a lot of fun. They play about every little instrument you can. He's got a toe shaker, he's got a this, and they got a fiddle in the band, and they got and so they all play like 3 or 4 instruments. They're really good, and they played Folk Alliance and blew everybody away. And so they're coming back. They're playing the festival. I think they're going to play some of our special shows. We're hoping to get them to do. They've actually reached that kind of next level where it's not as easy to just say to them, "Would you do a pop up?" Oh yeah, where a lot of our artists it is, but we're hoping to get them to do a pop up, which is how they started as a band, and we'd love to be able to feature them. So. The other question I'll ask you guys about as it relates more to just that idea of how experiences and so forth, how does that, I'm thinking of some things right away. I'm thinking I got to talk to you guys about sponsorship because I can think of some really cool stuff we could do together from on the home side of things. You can probably guess what I'm thinking, but the idea of how do experiences, I think you hit on it before, which was the idea that when you're doing working with a customer, a client, an appreciator, you want them to become appreciators of what you're doing. Because my whole thing in the branding world on the marketing side, I would always try to work with our clients to understand that a brand is not a slogan. A brand is not it's not even really what the person says to you when I say to you, so and so. What it is it's literally the look on their face when I say to you, and that same thing is for a personal brand. If I say, do you know so and so, and it's what is that look on their face and that comes up, and that's kind of the typical of their brand. But also then it's the experiences. And if you could talk a little bit about, I would think that's so key in what you do is that whole interaction has to be from start to finish. The minute they call they either look for you online or they call the number. How does that experience play?
I think one is, the expectation for, I think, a home buyer in particular is it's really, really exciting when you make that decision right there. Like, I want to go buy a house. You're about to go do that. Right? Like,
I'm so excited.
First
I'm
time home buyer,
tomorrow.
I'm so excited.
Yes.
But then there's all the things that happen in between
that are scary.
And there's that stress.
Intimidating.
Yes. And so I was doing a speaking event down in Fond du Lac in front of about 100 lenders last year. And it was a great question. It came to me. It was a similar question, but they said, what should a lender, or they said, why does a home buyer like personality change after they get an accepted offer? And I said, well, let's think about this for a second. This person was all excited about buying this house. Now they have approximately 35 days to pack all their shit, put it into a moving truck, or find a friend that has a truck.
Reality sets in.
All of that. I said, so they have that. They may have kids. Now they also have
all the things.
Closing dates might not line up. Maybe they're trying to sell their house and they have to do that. And then you're asking them for some paper that they're supposed to have on their computer that they can't find.
And don't forget about the down payment.
3 months ago.
Maybe.
And they have, possible down, whatever it is. And so the stress level for that human being changes. So as a real estate agent, you have to be confident in being able to confidently tell that person, listen, it's going to be okay. It's not going to happen today.
You're not alone.
Let's make sure we prioritize what we're getting at first. You can't buy the house without the paperwork. So let's get the paperwork done. And a great lender will have most of that stuff done by pre-approval and other things like that. But then there's always the documents and other things that go along. So people do change throughout that process. And then you get to the end of it, and now you've just worked with that person for 30 days. It feels like a year to them probably because of all of the different emotions that they've gone through. And you get to closing day, and usually it's a big hug and a thank you. And I can't believe this. This is so amazing. And you just had the biggest transaction. Or for a seller, they're getting the largest check they're ever going to see in their entire life. Right. And you're a part of that. That's pretty amazing and pretty awesome. And I think I have to remind myself of that, especially now, because not to brag, but I did 7 closings last week. To me, I want to not be that person that becomes transactional.
Yeah. How does it not become ho hum?
Yeah. Right, exactly. And it's to remember all of that. And so the exciting part for me now is I get to train all of my agents now and to see now they get to help that seller, that home buyer. They get to hug it out with them. They get those Google reviews. They get all that stuff. And that's starting to happen with our younger agents. And that gets me really excited, which then reminds me of why I'm doing this in the first place. So all that being considered, to answer your question again, it all goes back to how you make that person feel throughout the entire process. And, I think we do a great job of that here.
Yeah, I think we prioritize the relationship at the end of the day. And yes, the value add, of course, there's a benefit there. Like we can tell somebody that's going to buy a home from us, hey, we got you covered on the moving truck. Because you're one of us. Yeah,
you know that. I call it I don't have a friend who has a truck stress.
Right. So now we got that covered. Hey, you're in your new home. You need to hang some stuff up, but you don't have the right tools. We got you covered. Right. Hey, we even have other things happening with other people that we do business with that are part of this community, that are your neighbor. Come to our VIP.
I need a new roof. Who do I call?
Or our contractors. We can hook you up with Prime Roofing, or we have a number of lenders. I think realtors today are starting to become more and more, especially with the new generation coming up. I think they'll be positioning themselves as more as that personal brand and building themselves up as a local resource to connect them more like a peer. Hey, I know what's happening in Green Bay or whatever area you serve. Here's how you get connected to buy a home and be part of this community.
Well, even for us now, how well I connect. So now I'll say, let's say randomly I run into somebody. I'm at a show and they're an amazing band, and I'd be like, hey, I know this. I know Dave. Here's how you can reach out to Dave. I can't guarantee anything, but Dave can point you in the right direction of how to become part of that.
Absolutely.
That's the fun part of that's the reality of a real estate agent, is to be a connector and a provider in the community, if they're doing that the right way. And it's not about them. And I always talk about commission breath too, is and you can smell it on an agent when they're like,
hungry for that money.
I need that check. And you see that a lot with first, rookie agents because it's a tough business to get into. But then, they have that commission breath, and it's like their paycheck is more important than the result. That's where you get that. And then you do get some veteran agents that are burned out, and you can smell it on them too. But
it's more transactional.
It becomes transactional. And again, that's my big fear, is to remind myself, like, hey, don't do that. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, it's kind of like with our artist care. It's in our case, because the festival's free, in some ways our customer quote unquote, is really our artists. The artists are what fuel what we do, and quite frankly, our venues, the venues that host things, and so we got to make sure that we're paying attention to that. But in your case, with it's like a customer care thing versus an artist care thing. You know, it's really about nurturing that from start to finish.
And it's not always easy because you're dealing with humans. I always tell people, the house is easy, the human is difficult.
A big decision like that, can bring out a lot of emotions.
Houses are always
too.
easy. Like, if there's a foundation issue, we got some people that can fix that. The electrical, roofing, all that stuff. I know all about that stuff. I've flipped enough houses in my day to know like the issues that are going on. However, the human being that's going through that, if you can be like, hey, listen, this is like $2-3 grand. It's not the end of the world. Do you want the house, or are you more worried about,
Help
light
people
switch
make those
not
decisions.
working or something like that? So we deal with a lot with that too. So.
But at the end of the day, real estate will always be a relationship game. Always.
No doubt.
Always.
No doubt.
Yeah, it can't not be.
Really, most businesses.
Well, reality,
It is
right?
true.
That is true. It's always about relationship more than
sure.
I mean, the products are great, but again, it comes back. If you have a really good business and a really good product, and you make a person feel really good, that's a winning combo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the key.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with no further ado, where can we find about Mile of Music? What's up and coming this year?
How can we funnel people
How can we
your way?
get people to come to the show?
Well, just mileofmusic.com. It's as simple as that. We keep everything all the information's on the website. We have an amazing app.
Yeah, the app's actually really cool.
And the app has been an award-winning app, and it's done by Core BTS, and they've never charged us a penny from day one.
Makes it so much
it's just
easier.
incredible.
Yeah.
And and they're doing a great job. We have some little kinks we're still working out with it, but when the festival gets rolling, it is such an amazing asset to everybody.
That's
and
how I schedule all my concerts.
But mileofmusic.com will have all the information, and it's also basically going to give you the information on the full schedule will come out in about a week or so, usually around the 20th of July. It's pretty close to when the festival hits is when we actually do the schedule. But and that's because there's a lot to it, and then we want to make sure that we double check with all the artists to make sure that we're still set. And, hey, these are the 4 set times, because it's a lot easier to have it right than have to go back and make a bunch of changes. And then, of course, you're sitting back going, okay, so what's the weather going to do? And that's just the way it is.
That's just the way it is.
That you can't control.
In the event world, it's just the way it is.
It
I
always
really
will
appreciate
be.
you having me on, though. It's just great. So
we love having you on. We're obviously big music enthusiasts. Being from Appleton, going to the show so many years, bringing family and friends there. I just want to thank you. I also want to thank you for helping me out last year. And also, we just put out the save the date for Rise Together's 11-year anniversary at Gibson Music Hall.
Yeah,
so we'll
that'll
be
be
doing
great.
that this year. Music, art, food. So that is going to be on September 13th. So
by the way,
I
I joked because it was Gibson Community Music Hall. Now it was Gibson Music Hall. Now it's Gibson Community Music Hall when we took it over. And
That's right.
I joke with people that I put the word in there to remind us that we have to do community stuff. And it's working. It's working.
It is. So thank you so
great.
much for that. And thank you for being on today's show.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, guys.
Give us a like, a follow, subscribe.
Yes, please. And share with your friends. We appreciate you.
See you all next
This
week.
is It's Your Neighbor Podcast.